Did I scare you, my children?
I'm not actually sure how we pronounce this one, let's be honest. So it's Belzebuth or Beelzebub, something like that. Essentially, I believe it is the Mexican translation of Beelzebub, which is actually known as in Poland. Anyway, this is a religious / demonic horror movie directed by Emilio Portes, and this one stars Tobin Bell, who of course you may know from the Saw franchise, Tate Ellington, and Joaquin Coisio, who also is the kind of the main character here. Now, he plays a character called Ritter, who is an embittered police detective. And at the beginning of the movie, we see him, his wife has just given birth, and he's happy as Larry, and he leaves his wife and baby to go to work. He's a police officer. However, a woman, a orderly, a nurse comes in and kills all of the babies in this particular ward, including his. And this is the setup here. It's particularly gruesome. And it appears there are some demonic forces that are targeting children, maybe because they believe the next Messiah is about to be born, and as such are targeting, you know, those people that are kind of connected to it. So it falls down to Ritter, this police detective, to team up with an American Vatican-sanctioned investigator, and we have this enigmatic rogue priest played by Tobin Bell, who may or may not be of help to them. What will happen? You have to watch the movie to find out. So I've actually been keen to watch this one for some time now, and I finally kind of got round to it. So let's talk about, first of all, what works. Okay, I have to say this was a pretty tense movie. I think the fact that it is punctuated by the mass murder of children, it becomes somewhat shocking, and I feel this may be a step too far for some people. But that opening moment where we have this nurse grab a scalpel, I mean, we don't see scalpel going into babies, but obviously we see kind of blood sort of shooting up and stuff like that. It's pretty shocking, and it kind of shows you that this movie is planning to kind of get to go there and have these kind of moments. And there are other ones as well through the movie that kind of like deal with these possessed people ultimately trying to kill children en masse. And it's, you know, like I've said, the setup here is gruesome, and I think it really benefits from being in Mexico, where we have this kind of culture of violence with kind of the cartels, and they are kind of mentioned as that people believe that's the cartels. First of all, really kind of makes you think, you know, this is kind of a desperate place to live. And there's a line in the movie where they say some of these stuff just doesn't go investigated because it's just how it works in that country. So it's all pretty shocking stuff, and it kind of really gives you a sense of danger in the movie. Now, it being a Mexican film, essentially, you would think that it's all a foreign language, but it's actually a mix. I would say it's probably about 60% actually in English, with the rest of it being in kind of obviously Spanish. Now, we have two American characters, obviously, Tobin Bell and this agent, so their scenes are all in English, and obviously the Mexican characters that speak English to them. But when we have Mexican talking to Mexican person, obviously they speak in a foreign language. But I appreciated the fact that this is obviously, you know, it's authentic because we don't have Mexicans speaking to Mexicans in English. It kind of makes sense and adds to that kind of authenticity. This movie, I think, is it comes across to say almost like a procedural to a certain degree, punctuated by moments of extreme violence, and has this dark, growing kind of foreboding atmosphere where we kind of learn what is kind of going on, and there are some kind of great set picks, especially kind of after the fact where we're doing these investigations, we're kind of learning maybe what's kind of going on. I think it really kind of sets the stage for a spooky and kind of disturbing atmosphere, and that kind of goes all the way through it. Now, there are some kind of more overt horror scenes. There's a particular kind of one involving a reanimated Jesus statue on a cross. The idea behind it is fascinating and quite horrifying, especially if you are of the kind of the religious kind of persuasion, really, because obviously it's kind of like the perversion of Jesus and all of that. But it's a good idea. Execution, we'll come on to that again in just a second. But the idea I think is solid. And it really does have some absolutely fabulous kind of set design here, where we see all of these kind of like this abandoned kind of village. There's these kind of tunnels towards the end of the movie. They look great. They look very oppressive, very spooky, very old, and kind of, you know, very kind of authentic to obviously what the kind of the movie is going for. I really enjoyed the acting of this movie as well. I think the guy who plays Ritter, you know, he's a middle-aged man. He's not particularly in shape, but it just added a kind of a level of realism that we don't have this clean-cut kind of action hero. You know, he's a tired, embittered man who obviously has had to deal with personal kind of tragedy. But he still comes across as altruistic, but, you know, he's at the end of his kind of tether and really doesn't kind of maybe be as kind of gentle in interrogations and things like that. But I appreciate quite a you know, this gritty kind of protagonist here. And then Tobin Bell as well. You never quite know if he's on the up and up. You know, he seems like he could be a little bit shady here. And we learn some things about his kind of his character through the movie that kind of seems very intriguing, I have to say. And I think the movie's cast very well as well. The movie obviously has some big themes, so this is kind of like, this is ultimately a possession demonic movie, but the stakes here are actually larger than a lot of the other kind of movies. So if you do feel what's on stake here, it reminded me of Terminator in a weird way, or more specifically Terminator 2. You just have the stakes are bigger than your kind of your standard maybe possession films. Okay, so what doesn't work? So two things really. So the first really is the digital effects, the CGI effects. Unfortunately, are quite poor. As I've mentioned, we have this kind of this Jesus statue that kind of animates and comes to life and kind of communicates with our characters. And the idea behind it is terrifying. And, you know, the design isn't bad, but the execution of the CGI is quite poor. So there is unfortunately, some fairly shoddy CGI work here. And it's not only limited to that, because, for example, we have towards the end, where someone gets stabbed, we have very obvious CGI blood kind of splurting out. It just didn't need to be there. And there's a couple of instances as well where the CGI here just doesn't work. It's not particularly good. The other thing is, the movie really doesn't have much originality, if we're being honest. It kind of just goes into, you know, a kind of story that we have seen before and is relatively kind of tired at that point. It doesn't mean to say it doesn't tell it well, it just isn't particularly original in a lot of ways. And I have to say, I think the third act is actually a little weak. We have these kind of our group of protagonists go into these tunnels, and I don't know, it just didn't really seem quite as climactic as I would have hoped, and seems a little bit drawn out at times. I don't want to spoil too much for you, but ultimately, I think this movie is probably a good possession demonic movie. If you like those kind of like demon movies, possession movies, you know, Antichrist movies, I think this one is definitely a worthy watch. In fact, I quite enjoyed it. A lot of that is down to the character work, and you know, our kind of realistic portrayal and set design and stuff like that. Maybe the actual supernatural side of stuff was a little bit lackluster, but the idea was good. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I do think this one is worth a watch. It's not without its faults, but I do feel most people who like these kind of type of movies will enjoy this one. I have heard some people call this the scariest movie ever made. It really isn't, but it is quite shocking at times because of the violence given to babies. So just bear that in mind. It might be a little bit too much for some people. 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.